Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. Collin Wilson and I will be diving into college baseball, and that's all you're going to hear from us until we get into preview season for college football, which is right over the horizon. So don't feel as though we are in the wilderness in terms of college football talk. But as of right now, the Diamond is dominating everything in the college space, and Collin's projections for every single matchup from the Thursday game ones all the way through the final game of the series on Sunday, as well as all of his projections in terms of the futures market. That's what we're getting into as we lead up to the final 2 weeks of the regular season in college baseball. Then we have the selection show. We get into the NCAA tournament. We get into the regionals, super regionals, leading up to Omaha. A lot to unpack. And so many teams moving in the past week. There were a handful of ranked matchups. You saw some of the top teams continue to falter a little bit. So there's a shakeup at the very top of the polls. And I think that's where we're going to start here, Collin. This has been a show that has distinct SEC bias, and for good reason. There's, I would argue 6 or 7 teams that legitimately can win the national championship out of the Southeastern Conference, and then even more teams that can make some noise and at least get to super regionals. But let's talk about other teams that are on the national radar at this point. And we basically kicked the can down the road a little bit, talking about teams on the West Coast, the UC Irvines. You can't necessarily take them seriously to win the national championship. But we talked about Oregon State a couple of weeks ago and their opponent, who are the Oregon Ducks. Well, the Ducks have put it all together. And is this now time to take them seriously? Because they are up to the top 10, top 5, depending on which ranking service you're looking at. But the futures market remains unimpressed with what Oregon has done. They're still sitting out there at 50-1. And when you look under the hood, they're top 15 in slugging, home runs. Mason Neville has 24 bombs on the season. So clearly he's done so much. And I guess that's where I'd like to start here. First of all, how did the Hogs let him get out of Fayetteville? He transfers to Oregon. Now, granted, he did not play very well for the Hogs in limited plate appearances. But from the get-go, he was a power guy. The question was, can he avoid the strikeout? Can he be more of a contact hitter to up his average? Well, last season, he was someone who was boom or bust from the dish. But when you look at his numbers this year, 268 last year in terms of average, jumped up to 329. You look at his on-base, 369 last season, up to 471. So he's made this huge jump, all his power numbers now leading the country in home runs. So talk to me about Neville, what he means to the Ducks, and does it sting at all that he's not there in Fayetteville?
Well, of course it stings that Mason Neville is not with the Razorbacks, but when you look at his performance 2 years ago for the Hogs, he just couldn't get any playing time. 19 games, most of that was on the midweek, didn't produce a home run. I think he had 3 hits, so it was just kind of an unknown factor that came out of Las Vegas, lefty hitter in the outfield. And listen, here's the deal. You're not going to bat in the Arkansas Razorback lineup unless you're capable of hitting double-digit bombs over the year. And Mason Neville probably just got stuck in with a log of guys that can absolutely bomb. We could have absolutely used him last year. I think Arkansas's calculated base runs was like 6.8 last year. They just could not get any offense going, and losing Mason Neville was a big part of that. But at the same time, that whole entire Arkansas lineup retooled for this year. So not missing him that much this year, but man, imagine where Arkansas would be if they had him.
Now, Neville's obviously a superstar, an All-American, leading the country in home runs. But for Oregon, it probably comes down to pitching, right? You got Grayson Grinsell, who's a legit ace, 2.77 ERA, 3.2 Ks over walk ratio. But he's kind of an outlier in terms of, his stuff. He's not a power pitcher. He tops out at about 91 miles per hour. He's more keen to get batters out with his off-speed stuff, his change, his curve, his slider. But the question I have for the Ducks, whether you are enamored with Grinsell or not, is their second or third option. Are they good enough once they get into the regional and the super regionals to be able to win those games where they have to rely on their bullpen or to have to get a quality start out of their second or third option? And it kind of starts with Jason Reitz for me. When you look at his potential, obviously his extension at 6'11", he's insane in terms of his frame and his arm angle and things of that nature. But his heater tops out at 97 miles per hour. So his top end stuff, when you add in his power slider, this guy, at least compared to some of the opponents that they're going to draw later in the tournament, he looks like he has it. Is he someone that you can put faith in that he can help the Ducks get over the hump? And if so, is 50-1 a number that interests you?
No, and I think that's a shock to everybody because Oregon is 9-1 in quad one games. Quad one games. That's not quad 1 and 2. That's quad one games. 9-1. That's a very impressive record. You would think the Ducks are for real. Their strength of schedule is about 36. That's drugged down by a really kind of terrible schedule that they've had by joining the Big Ten, it would have been more powerful for them to still have the Pac-12 around. When you look at some of the key games that they played, they swept Oregon State recently. They've won 2 series on the road in the Big Ten. That's good, even though it came against Michigan State and Maryland. A previous sweep of USC in this season, that's big because USC is probably going to be making the regionals. So I like all of that. But there's one thing that's kind of turning me down. Outside of Grayson Grinzel, this pitching staff would scare the hell out of me to have a future on them going into regionals. A 4.2 staff ERA, that balloons to a 5.8 xFIP when you look at the entire staff. And really outside of the 1 or 2 pitchers that they have, starting with Grayson Grinzel, outside of that, there isn't much to go on. And I am going to mention this later. We're calling for Texas to be a little bit overinflated for about 2 weeks. And I was waiting to pound and fade them. It worked last weekend. Oregon is one of those teams, when you have an xFIP that's nearing 6 and you have an ERA that's at 4, outside of your prime Friday night starter, there's just not a lot left on this staff to back with your money.
You know, when you mention Oregon and the fact that they may not be a candidate to break through, I always like to put this in perspective. Do you know the last time that they made the College World Series? I'll just throw this out there.
Well, they made the Supers. I don't know, actually.
The best picture was On the Waterfront in 1954. So I would say, you know, hypothetically they're due at this point. But I think you make a good point in terms of when they get into those critical moments and they have to turn to their pen, it's more likely than not that they're going to give up some crooked numbers and potentially get run off the diamond against, you know, some elite offenses, which really goes to show in terms of the pod that they get selected for, that really has a huge impact. If it's, you know, teams that are looking to manufacture runs that are dink and dunk kind of offenses, potentially they can sneak by. But if they, you know, get matched up with one of those SEC powers as a 2 seed, then all of a sudden things get a little dicey. All right, we've satisfied our non-SEC chatter portion of the program. So let's turn to 3 teams that you think are going to be in the mix to secure a super regional seed. And what do you mean by super regional seed? Just for, you know, people who are a bit more casual when it comes to college baseball, what does that phrasing mean?
Yeah, so the field of 64 is going to include 16 pods of teams that are seeded 1 through 4. Your teams that are 4th are going to be your High Points, your Oral Roberts, your small MAC conferences, and your MAC conference champion or winners, and they will represent those. Now, the 3 seeds and the 2 seeds are where you're going to get into teams that are recently been hot and made it into regionals, or teams that have fallen from 1 or 2 and fallen down the board and could be in a slump. Your number 1 seeds, there's going to be 16 of them. So in the opening weekend, you're going to have 16 regional hosts. But what's important is those top 8, because those top 8 are called super regional seeds. There's only going to be 8 of them. And that means that those teams absolutely control their destiny by playing at home for their path to Omaha, Arkansas, Texas, LSU. These are teams that are, no matter what happens the next 2 weeks in the SEC tournament, they're pretty much guaranteed to be a super regional team. So when we're getting into this, when you're looking at the futures market, don't you want to back a team that potentially has a really good path to being a super regional seed and hosting games at home before, you know, they try to make their way to Omaha? And I think that's where I kind of got clogged up this week on Auburn, Vandy, Georgia. They are competing for that final 8th seed. This is a nasty one between these 3 teams to try to dissect which one is the best future.
Yeah, looking at it right now, per Baseball America's bracket projection, Georgia as a 2 seed, Auburn as a 5, Vandy as a 7. But as you mentioned, because there's 2 weeks left on the SEC tournament, if any of those teams flame out, they certainly could give up an opportunity to have a super regional seed. And what's fun about discussing these 3 in particular is you have 2 polar opposites and then Auburn in the middle. The Diamond Dogs can mash the ball, but they haven't figured out things on the pitcher's mound. Vandy has to manufacture runs, but their staff continues to overachieve from the bump. And then there's Auburn, who's really balanced and kind of right down the middle. They're 8 games above 500 when facing quad 1 and quad 2 competition. So let's start with, let's say, a team like Auburn, as I mentioned, a team that's somewhere in between. They have those moments where the pitching staff puts it all together. They have some moments where they manufacture some runs and start to get hot from the dish. Let's talk about the Tigers first.
Yeah, I do like, first off, you can't go what these teams did against each other to try to break this down. Auburn beat Vandy in a series, Vandy swept Georgia, and Georgia swept Auburn. So they've all kind of piled up against each other. You can't use that. But for Auburn specifically, they beat Georgia and Vandy on xFIP from a team staff perspective, and they beat them on calculated base runs, which means the offense is better than both of them. Their xFIP is better than both of them. Their final games, they're going to have a series at home against South Carolina, who, sorry, Gamecock fans, I think maybe you've given up on this season. And then they're going to go to Ole Miss, a team that's beatable. You can win the series there, but we'll see. We'll see how important that series is and how serious they're going to take that last series of the season. So, to me, South Carolina has lost 6 of their last 7 games. Ole Miss is RPI 17th. That will help boost Auburn in the final week. I do like Auburn, what are they, 19-11, quad 1, quad 2 games. That is an impressive mark. So I expect, for me, Auburn to be above Georgia and Vandy in this little analysis that we have of the 3 teams.
Yeah, just to dive in a little bit deeper with Georgia, their offense obviously tremendous, leading the country in home runs. But in terms of where they are ranking wise versus where they are in the futures market, it seems like they're going in opposite directions. Georgia is pretty much consensus top 5 across all rankings, but you can get them at 19-1 out on the futures market. Is that just bettors and the market saying this staff can't be trusted even to get out of regionals?
Yeah, listen, Georgia can hit, and we all know that, and that's the reason why I was kind of piping over at 3 straight back in January. Like, you got to get your Georgia 40-1s. This is potentially a super regional team, and if not, then they're going to be a regional team in Athens and blow the ball out of the water. But the pitching has been poor at best. Best hitting of this group, worst pitching of this group. They're going to finish up at Alabama. Then they're going to host Texas A&M. So there are RPI advantages here that if Georgia can go 4-2 out of those 2 series, potentially might have locked up that super regional seed. But for me, the Georgia pitching staff, I just cannot get over a 5.3 xFIP that goes against a 4.7 ERA. So that means their team pitching staff is not good. And the advanced analytic behind it, the FIP and the xFIP, prove that they're worse than they actually shown. You can't go against home runs per 9 being number 1, but at some point they got to probably play on the road and get out of the friendly confines in Athens and try to hit somewhere else and pitch somewhere else, which I don't know can happen.
Do you ever watch sports and find yourself wishing that there was a way you could get into the game and be even more involved? Well, with Underdog, there's finally a way to make picks on sports without leaving the house. The game is in your hands. To play, choose whether a player will go higher or lower on a specific stat like touchdowns, strikeouts, points scored, and more. You've got all your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. You can create entries just with basketball or baseball picks. You can mix and match across any sport that you wish. You can play with as little as $1, and if you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. So you could turn a single dollar into $1,000 just with your sports knowledge. Now, I've been playing Underdog throughout the Major League Baseball season. You got NHL playoffs. You got the NBA. I'm sweating every single game in the NBA because no lead is safe. We just saw that between the Cavs and the Pacers. You can have that level of excitement on a nightly basis, and that's the beauty of Underdog. You can ride the hot hand. You can go with a player or a team that you consider to be undervalued. And basically, Underdog has you covered top to bottom. So download the Underdog app and sign up now using promo code BBOC to unlock a special offer for up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun and sign up with promo code BBOC. Claim your special offer today for up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly upon your first deposit. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, and 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text Hope NY. Let's hit up a quick game of Pepper before we get into your Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday projections. And let's play, a game of choose your own adventure, Collin. I'm going to give you 3 players, assuming they all play to their absolute ceiling from here on out. Which one of these players do you think will have the biggest impact on their team's overall chances to get to Omaha? Let's start with Georgia, who you just discussed. Layden Finley, one of their starters, the big righty, has looked really good in his last 4 starts. 3 of his last 4, he's only given up 1 run, earning wins over Arkansas, Mizzou, and Oklahoma. He held the Hogs, Tigers, and Sooners, like I said, to 4 runs total across those 18 innings. Then you look at Auburn. Auburn's a team that needs someone to step up in terms of their lineup. Ike Irish, I can't pass this guy up, just a phenomenal name. He's slashing 335, 451, 646 from the dish with 12 home runs. Is he doing enough to elevate this Auburn offense when it matters the most? And then let's close out with a Cinderella option as well. Coastal Carolina's Jacob Morrison is built like a Detroit Pistons power forward from the 1980s. He's absolutely huge. He's pushing 250 pounds. But his last 3 games, 20 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, 19 Ks, and 0 walks. You can't score if you don't get people on base against this guy. And a big part of it is that not only can he strike you out, but he's pitching in such a way that's leading to weak contact and fewer base runners. Coastal, by the way, 55-1 to win it all. Of those 3, Finley, Irish, and Morrison for the Chants, who do you think, if they play absolutely out of their mind, has the best chance to drag this team to Omaha?
Let's go ahead and start with the 2 pitchers here. And let's start with Coastal Carolina and Jacob Morrison, our Rick Mahorn, Bill Lambier type body from the late 80s for our Pistons. And I think what you have to look at here is that Jacob Morrison has a ERA of 2, but when you go into FIP and XFIP, that falls to 3.9 and then 4.8 for an XFIP for Jacob Morrison. So I don't trust the stuff that he's had out there. When you put that up against Leighton Finley, considering the strength of schedule that he's had to pitch against, he has a 4.8 ERA and he has a FIP and an XFIP about 5.8 and 5.2. Those aren't great numbers, but those numbers are just barely below what Jacob Morrison has. And considering the strength of schedule that these two have had, I mean, the RPI for Georgia's number 1, they've played everybody in the country in the SEC. So I think Leighton Finley is the winner here, but I'm going Ike Irish for the Auburn. And that is the most critical, most important player here that can absolutely carry everyone. And the reason is because if Auburn is going to win, it has to come from the offense. They're 11th in fielding percentage. Their pitching staff is okay, but their on base is 101st. Their slugging is 82nd. Their home runs per 9 are 69th. Auburn only advances as far as Ike Irish can hit them. That is the most critical piece of that team, and I'll take him as, if he gets hot, he can carry Auburn to Omaha.
All right, let's dive into Thursday's slate. We don't always deep dive Thursday because there's a smaller slate. There can be a lot of massive favorites on the board, which makes it difficult to add it in unless you're going to play run lines. Auburn is minus 540 at home against South Carolina, at least by your projections. Coastal could end up closing minus 800 against Monroe. So not a lot of great options, but there is some fun brewing in the Big 12. Your projection for BYU Kansas on the total is 20. And sometimes it's as simple as find the highest total on the board and bet over. Certainly we've done that in college football at times here at BBOC. Is it that simple? Just kind of like relax, just fire and over, and then just enjoy some innings where you could see 5 or 6 runs from the Cougs or Jayhawks?
Look, this is a market problem. This is not a projection problem. Every single week, BYU and Kansas games, out of my projections, are around 18 or 19. The market continues to put up 15 and a half. And I think last week we might have had a 30-run ball game. So BYU and Kansas are going to meet with these two offenses. The park factors for Kansas, when you look at Hoagland Ballpark for Kansas, it's just been a run fest. And the BYU pitching staff has a team ERA of 7.5. A team ERA of 7.5. These Kansas and BYU totals, they're not being properly priced. I make this first game 19.8. I think if you get anything in the 14, 15, 16 range, you're going to hit the over. And when you look at these two pitchers going up here, you look at Justice Reeser, Dominic Vogelli, we're staring at XFIPs that are at 7. We're staring at ERAs that are 7.5. It's just nothing about this screams that there won't be runs. So I would say keep an eye over on the projections page that I have at 3 straight, and definitely be clicking on the link to the wind. The wind, for those of you that follow on my plays, the wind absolutely in college baseball has the ability to shut down an over or an under, even if I may be a 1.5 or 2 runs outside of my projection. Defenses play a part, wind blowing straight in. These are college kids. This is not as sound as saying Wrigley is getting 20 miles an hour blown in from Lake Michigan. It's definitely an under. These kids could have sloppy defenses. Other things could happen. Just pay attention to wind when you make these bets. But I'm definitely over BYU Kansas on Thursday night.
The majority of the series start on Friday, so we'll move to the Friday slate. Some huge conference showdowns between Vandy, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, North Carolina against NC State, and the headliner LSU versus Arkansas. Got to love the battle for the boot. We'll get to that more on the Saturday card. But let's start further down the card in terms of value that you're seeing. FSU is traveling to Berkeley as a big favorite with Jamie Arnold on the bump, the future top pick potentially in the Major League Baseball draft. He's got plus fastball. His breaking stuff really defines him. when he has that sweeping slider working for him and he's missing bats, he's absolutely elite. But when he struggles to locate it, he can get himself into trouble, and he's done that multiple times on the road this year. Is this an opportunity to fade Arnold?
I think so. Number one, Jamie Arnold is always overpriced in the market. I project him about minus 320. I'm sure that'll be higher, which when it is higher like this and a team is on the road, I'll look at the run line on the other team. Am I in love with Cal baseball? Absolutely not. Am I in love with David Shaw, who's going to take the mound against Jamie Arnold? Absolutely not. He's got an ERA of 8.7. The good news is he only lasts 2 innings in every outing. So this is really a team staff Cal thing to try to keep up with Florida State. And, when you look at Jamie Arnold, he has had struggles on the road. Notre Dame in March, 6 earned runs given up to Miami on the road earlier this season. And you look at those, specifically the Notre Dame game, the Notre Dame series game was in March. Temperatures were not great. Now, all of a sudden, Florida State is going to take the longest travel of anybody this weekend. It's going to be high 50s in Berkeley. It's going to be cold. I think this is a Cal run line for me. I just, Florida State is sitting at second, I think, right now in the D1 baseball poll. I mean, they're pretty comfortable. Not saying that Jamie Arnold's not going to be elite. He always is. But if he can't locate and it's 50 degrees, he's had this problem before. So Cal run line is a play I'm going to make. I do not like playing Cal baseball, but I think I can't pass up the spot with Jamie Arnold, who, by the way, he has a 2.29 ERA. He has a 4.2 xFIP. So he is an elite pitcher, but there could be some regression, and this could be the game.
We talked a lot about Oregon State in a recent episode just for the Beavers to go out and get swept in a 4-game set with Oregon. They rebounded against Hawaii, but now they open against Iowa and Cade Obermuller on the bump for the Hawkeyes. Is this a spot to play Nelson Keljo as an underdog? The lefty works with 3 pitches. His fastball can hit the mid-90s, but his slider is really the pitch that gets batters to chase and potentially miss. Is this an opportunity on an Oregon State team that, in terms of being independent, they're playing all kinds of different teams from all around the country, to pull a Big Ten team here as an underdog? Is that too good to pass up with Keljo on the bump?
Yeah, we needed to talk about this one because when the projections came out, and I usually cook them all up early in the week, and I saw Iowa minus 244 over Nelson Keljo and Oregon State, I really had to do a little bit more inspection. How in the world is Cade Obermuller projected over Nelson Keljo? And I'll say this because we're recording this on Wednesday, I don't see any odds makers making Oregon State a big underdog or an underdog at all against Iowa here on the road. But when you go into the stats, Cade Obermuller, a full run lower in ERA, a full run and a half lower in xFIP, and that drives this projection. When you look at calculated base runs, 7.5 for Oregon State versus 8.3 for Iowa. Iowa has better numbers everywhere from their starting pitcher analytics to their team staff ERA analytics to calculated base runs. So Cade Obermuller is going to be the play. Iowa might be a play all weekend. If they want to make Iowa a dog and give me some runs, I'll take that. But I think this number will be completely mispriced whenever Oregon State and Iowa is aligned.
Let's double click into another SEC game, the Sooners and the Wildcats. Kyson Witherspoon against Harris. You seem to favor Witherspoon in this matchup. He's got a little Dylan Cease in his game. He's been trusted to go deep in starts for the Sooners time and time again this season. He has 4 SEC starts with over 100 pitches, and that's something that's interesting to bring up. You mentioned some pitchers earlier in this episode that really are just looking to get out of the 4th inning and then hand it over to the bullpen. Not Witherspoon. He's somebody that can protect the bullpen in terms of how it's used throughout the series. So talk me through him as a minus 160 favorite over Kentucky.
Yeah, Kyson Witherspoon is somebody we played all year for OU. He is elite on the mound in the opening game for the Sooners. And I think the important thing to know, you mentioned how deep he goes into games. He averages 6 innings per outing, and that's considering the first couple starts of the season wasn't going deep because he just didn't have the arm strength. So these days, 6 innings is probably nothing for Kyson Witherspoon. I do project this at minus 160 over Nate Harris for Kentucky. And I know people come in, they're like, oh, they're going to throw so-and-so. A lot of team analytics drive these projections. So if Nate Harris is not throwing for Kentucky, and it could be Nick McKay or some of the other names, it could move the line 40 cents. I think the most important thing is Kyson Witherspoon is an elite pitcher that we've been on all season. I project this at minus 160. If odds makers want to put that out there, I would happily play OU, not just on the money line, probably on the run line as well.
A big money line between Tennessee and Vandy. You don't mind laying it with Liam Doyle on the bump in the first game of this series between the Doors and the Vols. Is this more of a run line, or do you have no problem laying minus 260? Maybe use it as a parlay sweetener for some other
I,
plays.
I don't have a problem playing Tennessee from here on out. I think, a lot of people are saying, how come they're losing so many series? And I understand that factor, but at the same time, it's not been because of the pitching. Liam Doyle is still supporting an xFIP at 3.3. When you look at the team ERA, we're at 3.5, and the xFIP is at 4.4. That 4.4 is well lower than any other SEC club from a full roster. So, I project Liam Doyle minus 260 against JD Thompson in the opening game. Um, we saw Arkansas slump for 3 weeks. There were some problems at the plate. We've seen some mistakes from Tennessee, but the advanced underlining analytics are that the Volunteers are for real. They're the only team in the conference that has 3 road series wins, and none of them were Missouri, by the way. I should throw out the free square there. So I do believe in Tennessee. I think they are a play on this weekend, and we'll see what number pops up, but I do project minus 260 for Liam Doyle on the first game.
Turning to Saturday, I want to give you the floor to discuss LSU and Arkansas, specifically in Game 2 with your beloved Gage Wood on the hill.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to take an under. Like, we're 5 days away, and I already know I'm going to be taking an under here. There's 2 things going on here, one on each side. LSU has Anthony Ianson going in the second game of their series. He's an absolute animal right now. He just came off one of the most dominating performances of the season. At Texas A&M last week, he went a complete game, gave up 1 earned run, and 14 strikeouts in Bluebell Park. That is extremely impressive. Now, on the Arkansas side, their game 2s have been elite. Yes, I mentioned Arkansas has lost some series. They have not lost in game 2 with Gage Wood and Gabe Gackle. That is the connection here. Gabe Gackle, no longer a starter, returns to his closing role. He is now slotted in to back up Gage Wood as Gage Wood is starting to build his arm strength. So what you get out of them, they've won 3 straight. They've allowed 6 earned runs in those 3 games. So I expect Arkansas's pitching to be elite, as it always has been on game 2s. I expect Anthony Ianson to completely take over games from here on out as a game 2 starter for LSU. I'm going to bet under on Arkansas LSU on this second game of the series. I don't care if the wind's blowing out on Alex Box. There's just way too much pitching in this game.
On the Sunday card, let's start with an ACC matchup, the Tar Heels against the Wolfpack. It looks like a coin flip, at least in Sunday's matchup between Jason DeCaro and Ryan Moran. DeCaro was a freshman All-American last season, but he struggled early this year, getting knocked around by Stanford, by Duke. But lately, he has been absolutely nails, allowing 4 earned runs across his last 4 starts. Fastball, slider, improved curveball, all of his top 3 pitches. He's someone who certainly is going to have some buzz in terms of when he gets up to the majors in a year or two. So when I also look at this, I think it's interesting in terms of the ACC. When you look at the pecking order, there's clearly a small handful of teams at the top who have been jockeying for position to be the top dog there. But you got to be able to win on the road. We bring it up time and time again. Once you get into the tournament, certainly once you get to Omaha, all of that home field advantage, that home cooking goes out the window. So what are you in terms of road RPI? That's why this is a great opportunity for UNC. What are you seeing in Game 3?
Yeah, I like Jason DeCaro here, and I think you're going to get a projection of about minus 110 both ways. So you wouldn't think that there's anything discerning between these 2 pitchers or these 2 clubs. But Jason DeCaro last year was projected to be the freshman phenom of the future for North Carolina. Everything about him said that the Tar Heels would be great for a few years. And under Jason DeCaro, he came out and struggled early this season. But if you look at his last few starts, he's been one of the best in the country. He's won 3 straight games, a grand total given up of 3 earned runs. The Tar Heels are going to be a play here on Sunday at Pick'em. And as long as Jason DeCaro is filling this final spot, then you can suggest that he's going to go up against teams' other third starters and other staffs that have been completely ran through by the time they get to this point in the weekend. So DeCaro is a pitcher that is completely on the rise, always going in the last game of the series for a rising North Carolina team. And I am going to back him here on Sunday.
Now, my favorite part where we add to our futures portfolio. Let me ask you this right off the top. We can agree there's basically no value on the top 5 to 10 teams right now. It's basically dried up where if you're looking to pull the trigger on them, you're almost hoping that they kind of flame out to end the regular season in the next 2 weeks or have an early exit from a conference tournament. Am I seeing that properly in terms of the way teams are priced, like a team like Arkansas or Tennessee?
Yeah, Arkansas and Tennessee, it's just not, I can't justify buys on these current numbers. LSU could lose the series to Arkansas this weekend and get a better number next week. I mean, this is a monster series between the Hogs and the Tigers. we'll see where the futures fall, because one of those teams is going to have a better futures number after this weekend, you would think. Odds makers have been very stingy on lowering Tennessee. I think I saw some 7-1s out there. We get some 10-1s out there, it'll be time to purchase, but not this week. We started off the season with Georgia futures, so we can't harp on that very much. We can't harp very much more on Texas A&M. I was out screaming about 50-1s and everything with the Aggies 3-4 weeks ago. So we can't go there. So really, there's no value. And if you don't have the teams that we've been gathering all season, there's those numbers are long gone.
What's nice though with the top teams kind of in a holding pattern, this is the perfect opportunity to add a long shot. And when I saw your projection page and the little grid, and I saw teams like UTSA, UConn, West Virginia, High Point, color me interested. Let's start with High Point. An offensive juggernaut, top 3 in home runs, on base, and slugging. But woof, this pitching staff is lost at sea, to put it lightly, and they've played absolutely no one throughout this entire season. The Panthers also, in terms of their overall brand, they made the NCAA tournament in March Madness. They got to have all those articles written and TikToks and Instagram videos about how they have some of the nicest dining halls in the entire country. You can get on a monthly basis a steak dinner on campus at High Point because they want to essentially teach you how to interact with fine dining as a young professional. That seems pretty awesome. They got ice cream trucks that are free as a part of your meal plan. It's a cute story. Their offense is electric, but this pitching staff, I mean, you have to scratch them off the list right away because of that, right?
Yeah, the pitching staff is so horrific. And let me just say this first. If you need an official future for the podcast, Auburn 40-1 is out there. All right. There's 30-1s out there, but there's some 40-1s nationally out there. Go out there and grab that. This portion of the podcast, I think it's time to reach. Go deep. Find some 200-1s, 300-1s, and 125-1s. Now with High Point, that's not going to be the team. High Point, absolutely one of the best hitting teams in the nation, top 3 in homers per 9 on base and slugging. But this pitching staff, 6.4 xFIP, 6.1 ERA. That means they're not good, and the underlining advanced analytics says they're worse than they're not good. And then the strength of schedule of 204th. I mean, sure, you can hit that kind of way against a 204th ranked strength of schedule, but you're pitching that way against a 204th strength of schedule. I'm not saying High Point's going to go in and do 2-Q at a regional, but this is not the future that you want to buy.
West Virginia up next, a promising staff ERA, but their underlying pitching stats indicate that the bottom could fall out at any point. Interestingly, they're 16-4 against quad 1 and quad 2 competition this year, but overall, when you look holistically at their strength of schedule, not great. But they're the best team in America in terms of road RPI. So every time I bring something up, there's a counterbalance for the Mountaineers. Is the price right to get involved with them?
No, I don't believe in West Virginia. And overall, I just don't believe in Big 12 teams at all, unless your name is TCU and Kansas State and you're coming to Arkansas for a super regional. I don't like any Big 12 teams long-term for futures. West Virginia has not played a soul. I look at the record. I look at the RPI. I look at everything. But they just haven't really played anybody. Arizona is potentially the only team to make the postseason that's been on their schedule, and the Wildcats took that series. They have a 3.7 ERA and a 5.6 xFIP. That's a huge no thank you for me. 2-run difference between ERA and xFIP. I'm just not there with West Virginia, and they're going to be a nice team, and they're going to host they're going to host up there. And after they get done with that, they're probably not going to make a top 8 seed, and they're going to have to go on the road, and that's when things could get real for the Mountaineers.
Go deep into the Northeast with UConn. Now, the Huskies have been red hot, albeit against late competition. Their bats continue to carry them. But when was the last time a team from that far up in the Northeast made a deep run?
Well, the problem is I do love UConn. I think I've had some sort of future or series. I know I've had series plays on UConn over the previous few years because they are stingy and they show up in regionals and they cause trouble, and they've made the supers before. So this is a program that has the pedigree, that has the history, that's done this before. Right now they're 34th in RPI. They've won 17 of their last 18 games. That's why you're starting to hear about UConn starting to float around with people that talk about college baseball, is because 17 of 18 games they've won. The issues are with the pitching staff, which is improving, but again, strength of schedule, ERA, FIP, xFIP, all over 6.1. And the hitting splits are just not good enough to support a pitching staff like that. So as much as I love UConn, I'm not going to place a future on them, but they are definitely a team that I'm going to tap to see what regional they get put in, to see if there's a path for them to cause some disturbance.
Let's close out with UTSA. Meet, cue up the Brad. Pitt's Moneyball clip. What do the Roadrunners do? They get on base. Is that enough for them to make some noise in the NCAA tournament?
Well, that plays not just at home, that plays everywhere. And I think that's really important, is that if you can get on base, you can cause a lot of problems. Listen, if you got some sort of Chipotle meal or a Taco Bell party box money that you want to spend tonight and you don't want to do it, I say go and grab that UTSA 125-1. They're currently projected as a 2 seed, not even a 3, not even a questionable 3. As a 2 seed, they're projected. They've won 12 of their last 13 games. They have great defensive numbers. Their RPI is 21st. They have the lowest XFIP of any of these 4 teams that we've talked about. Also, that 2 seed that was released by D1 Baseball put them in a regional in Austin against Texas. UTSA already played Texas this year and beat them. So I like UTSA 125-1. Meep meep. Hopefully, regional location plays in. They get sent to Austin. That would be real trouble for the Longhorns. 125-1. Little couch change on it. I like it. Meep meep.
That'll do it for today's episode. Thanks again for joining us, and special thanks to my co-host Collin Wilson for walking us through his futures portfolio, as well as every single matchup Thursday through Sunday, and a special thanks to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I'm your host, Mike Calabrese. We'll return next week for more coverage on the College Diamond. Good luck with all your bets, and we'll see you next time here at Big Bets on Campus.